Yes, hello, this is Spider from 8-Way Run, and this is my first character analysis video. In these videos we'll be taking a look at specifically character storylines and their fighting styles. Ideally though, we're going to try to learn a bit more about the characters we're studying. And some characters are very complicated, so they might require multiple videos, so be on the lookout for more content. Quoted from the SoulCaliburWikia.com, Tira's origins begin with a European organization hidden in the shadows, which went by the name of Bird of Passage. Aside from her training as an assassin, very little is actually known about Tira's history. Tira was raised exclusively as an assassin, as the Bird of Passage specialized in forming contracts with powerful people of prestige and dispatching assassins to eliminate important targets, and began killing at a very young age. Due to her upbringing, Tira became utterly inured to the sight of death, eventually becoming so engrossed in her ability to kill without experiencing any remorse or conflicting emotion that she started to become dependent on killing for stimulation it provided. During an assignment, the evil seed pervaded through the sky, burning the leader's mind and dissolving the chain of command. The evil seed was an event depicted in Soul Calibur Legends, where a bright beam of light shot into the sky from Soul Edge after it was accepted by Siegfried. Inadvertently, Tira was freed and drifted into the custody of an adoptive family. Although she struggled to adapt to an average life, Tira ruminated on the new freedoms that were provided and decided that this new life could be acceptable. However, Tira's peaceful new existence didn't last for long, as after she was scolded for releasing the youngest daughter's pet bird, she murdered her entire adoptive family in a blind rage. Realizing she could not live among ordinary people, and could not live without the fundamental excitement of inflicting death by her own hands, Tira fled. Amidst her travels, Tira learned of the Azure Knights massacres and started to harbor a twisted fondness for the terrifying figure. During this leaderless period, Tira's emotions spiraled out of control, rapidly swinging between extremities with the slightest provocation. Because she had grown up without the freedom to make her own decisions, Tira ultimately resolved to track down the Azure Knight and become his servant, believing him to be a kindred spirit due to his ability to spread pain and suffering. Tira arrived at Ostrensburg, where she met Zazalamel. Zazalamel explained that Nightmare was no more than a puppet being controlled by the evil sword Soul Edge. Tira was disappointed by this information, but still jumped at the opportunity later when she learned of the Azure Knight's resurfacing. After following a trail of massacres, Tira found Nightmare and became his servant. After this acceptance, she was given two tasks: to destroy the spirit sword Soul Calibur, thus liberating Soul Edge from his prison, and locating a new permanent host for Soul Edge. In order to fulfill these objectives, Tira was granted the protection of Nightmare's Raven sentries, the Watchers. Tira has two very different stances, or states, that she switches between: her jolly state and her gloomy state. Switching between them is almost always random. However, when her health gauge drops below 25%, she will automatically switch. She's a lot like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, in that you don't know exactly what you're going to get at any given moment. Her jolly state is actually quite good at zoning. That is, she has the ability to keep characters at bay and limit the amount of choices that they can make at any given time. Tira is fast enough that she can repeat this again and again. This creates a cat and mouse situation where it forces the opponent to react in some way that's usually hasty. This is your time to capitalize upon this and do some more damage. However, a volley of successful attacks doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be at an advantage. A life lead in jolly state doesn't really mean a whole lot to an opponent who can catch up quickly in 3 or 4 hits. That's why you need to make the decision to switch into her gloomy state at some point in order to reap higher damage payoffs or to go for greater ring out opportunities. A lot of it is just trying to get into gloomy state in order to reap the rewards of it. This is probably why she doesn't pay off that well competitively. If you're constantly trying to work towards getting to a good plateau only to be knocked back down to a lower level, your opponent doesn't have to worry about that. Your opponent has all the tools they need whenever they want. They only have to worry about what distance to be at. You have to worry about, well, not only the distance, but you have to worry about a whole nother level of psychology involved with your character. However, I think this is also a benefit for advanced Tira users, which are incredibly rare because of the stigma that attaches to this character. But I think that the psychological game attached to Tira is the most potential for her being one of the best top tier characters in the game. However, in order for him to be top tier, she will need more assets in Soul Calibur 5. One of her greatest downsides is that she doesn't have the ability to maintain good pressure. All of her good moves put the opponent back at a far range or a far distance. Now you might say, if you do play as Tira, you might say, well, maybe I'll just do 9B plus K, so you're going to jump over to them. However, it has the illusion of looking good, but the downside to that is that the timing for every single one of the attacks, A, B, K, is impactable. It can be guard impacted. They're all timed the same. So now you say, well, maybe I just won't do an attack. Well, what kind of choice is that? So you're just going to jump over to them and wish for the best? It doesn't make any sense. That isn't good pressure. That's a do or die situation. That's more risky than Nightmare's moves. At least with the Nightmare, you have the potential to hit them, or they're going to have to block it, or they have to dodge, or they have to do something. However, something worth mentioning is that her 7B plus K, or 8B plus K, or 9B plus K, all are different ranges of her jump. So this does give a little bit more choice in the matter, and there needs to be something a little bit more. A lot of the times I feel like she's missing a move. Like, I always keep thinking that she would be so much better if she just had a nice lunging grapple move that would give her a little bit more step game, a little bit more bonus to her step. Because it always feels like in order to make a good play, I need to step in like twice. And on the second step, my opponent is probably going to know what I'm up to. So there just seems to be like, there's always too much against Tira at all the wrong times. But I will say that her 9B is actually pretty good. And 9B is a kind of a delayed jumping attack counter move. And it's great because it allows me to mix up trying to get inside by jumping. And what I'll do is I'll sometimes jump in just like a regular jump. Sometimes I'll use 9B to pretend like I'm jumping in, but I'm actually doing an attack counter move. The benefit of this is that I'm dodging lows and I'm closing the distance, and it always feels like in Soul Calibur, between every single character in the game, it's just a battle to close the distance. And there might be characters I haven't played as, maybe Ivy, who might prefer to maintain far distance, but so far it just seems like every single battle perpetuates to the point where both characters are close together, and then it always comes down to the grapple, and then they're back farther apart again. So her mid-attack game is actually quite good. She has 6K, which it puts her to 0 frames even when it's guarded, which is amazing because it's an attack stun. The attack stun doesn't last that long. You can't really combo anything with it, but it gives you enough advantage to be able to put together strategic plays and give you a little bit more time to think. So her mid-attack game is pretty good. I mean, she has, even in Jolly State, she has 1 age slide just to be, which is pretty good, I have to say. It leads into some good damage. Hard to do. You get used to it after a while, though. It's her downside just seems to be she lacks a decent low game. She has, the only thing I can really think of that is actually worth using would be 8K. And 8K will give you some good damage and give you more time to think and knocks down the opponent. So there's some good synergy on that move. But even at it only hits at tip range. It won't knock down the opponent. So it just seems like a lot of her moves are unnecessarily nerfed. A lot of them don't do the damage you'd expect them to do for the amount of risk that you have to take in order to get them to work. She does have some great ring opportunities in both stances. However, the strange trajectory of the moves means you have to be kind of clever for your ring positioning. There's a noticeable difference between the
the ease of use between, say, Tira and like Nightmare. The Tira user will probably be striving constantly for scraps of damage, and you might occasionally get a good grapple in there now and again, and maybe an okay, maybe moderate damage. But when you're exhausted, and when it's, say, Nightmare's turn, they're going to be able to do a lot more damage to you. They're going to make up that difference a lot faster, and they might even ring you out twice as easy. Tira's safe moves, compared to, say, Amy, is pretty laughable. A lot of them just seem unnecessarily unsafe for the amount of reward you get. And again, so you'll be just striving for scraps of damage because maybe you'll be too afraid to take that unnecessary risk. It really isn't worth it for a lot of her moves. Again, it's not the damage that makes her a bad character. And I do say bad character loosely because she's pretty good once you get good with her, but the amount of skill it takes to equal, say, a Sophitia or a Nightmare or a Mitsurugi, the difference between these characters is the inability to keep consistent pressure on the opponent. Tira is constantly trying to get to that point, and there's never the point where it connects, or it's very difficult to maintain it. Let's say that. I admit, Tira is an excellent character for teaching the game to new players, because her damage is low, and she has really good zoning abilities, so your friends will be trying to get inside, and if you know how to use her zoning to her advantage, then it's going to come across more of a nuisance, but it's not going to be heavy penalties for your friends, so they're going to learn how to get around, they're going to learn how to maneuver without heavy consequences. Her style is going to prolong the match, and it's going to keep the battle action-packed. You're going to be doing lots of stuff. The concept of Tira is actually quite amazing, but it's going to require a lot more refinement if we're going to start taking her seriously in competitive matches.
There's one more thing that I'd like to note on, and that is while I was learning Tira, I made note cards, and I started putting just kind of habits that I wanted to start to get into on these note cards. And say some of them would be like, try to bait with 9k. So say I'll be at a far distance and I'll do 9k, and this move looks awkward in a way that it'll make the opponent want to rush in and attack because they think they have an advantage. However, something worth mentioning here is that Tira's back turn game is actually really good because she gets high priority, she has combos, she has a sweep kick that's decent but punishable, but she has great options with her back turn. And then only getting to this point is the hard part. But you can bait with 9k, back to the point. So I would also say, well, what am I forgetting to do? Well, I'm not really zoning with the right moves as I have been. So I started marking down the moves I'd like to zone with. And then once I got to the point, I had maybe 12 or 13 note cards, and I'd shuffle through these and make sure that I'm keeping up and doing what I want to do. And some of them that I made earlier just sounded stupid by the time that hours later, so I discarded them. And this is a good way to keep good habits going and to see what you're actually doing and to make sure you're doing it right. Fuzzy Viking says, I like Tira's randomness, and I think that it's a personal quality of hers that's interesting and unique. Adding moves that will always make her change would ruin that aspect of Tira. However, I don't think she should hurt herself, and if she does, she needs a better way to gain health back aside from Gloomy State B plus K. Typical Evil says, I think they should have a Raven return to her after battle to sit on a ring weapon, like the T-Hawk's Eagle in Street Fighter 4. Maybe she could kiss it like in Soul Calibur 3's intro, and it would screech at the camera. Well, that about wraps everything up here. I hope you all enjoyed my first video for character analysis, but every time I sit down and try to record these things, I always feel like I'm missing a lot. I'm leaving a lot of things out, and that's probably due to the fact that fighting games are incredibly complicated. So I hope you all enjoyed this. There's going to be more to come, and here's to Soul Calibur 5, and here's to Tira. Thanks a lot. Bye.